Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to look at the damage that I did to my library in September of 2019. I did some damage. What was I thinking? Anyway, and I'm going to look at the books that I hauled 1 year ago and assess how many I have read, what still needs to be read. What I'm doing this year, since I'm only about a year out from all of these book hauls, is I haven't really been thinking about books to unhaul yet. I had been planning that next year, when I'm a little further away, then I would start. But I think for this month, there have been some books that I already unhauled, and there are some books that I'm thinking of getting rid of, and we'll make a decision as we go through these. This is actually a kind of big month, not just in terms of the size of the haul I'm revisiting. There were 16 books. But I actually got some progress done. Like I said, there were already 2 unhauls. Let's dive right in and see what I did. The first book was Nightboat to Tangier by Kevin Barry. And the good news about this one is I didn't pay for it. I actually won one of those Goodreads contests, which I was beginning to think aren't real things and that nobody can actually win. But I won one. And here it is. It's Nightboat to Tangier by Kevin Barry. I have not read this yet. This was longlisted for the Booker Prize last year. I don't think it made the shortlist, but I did not double check, and I'm not going to do it right now. But it was definitely on the long list. It's sort of a Waiting for Godot update from what I remember, and I'm still interested in reading it. I just haven't gotten around to it so far. So this is definitely something that is going to be staying on my shelf at least until next year. Maybe next year I'll reevaluate where I'm at with this. I don't think I've ever read a Kevin Barry book either. No, I haven't. But I've heard really good things about him. I've gotten really good feedback on Nightboat to Tangier since it was released, and from reviews and from comments on videos like when I hauled it 1 year ago, and from Booker reaction videos last year as well. This seems to be a book a lot of people liked, so I would like to get to it. Still need to do it. That's the thing. Next is a book called, it's a graphic novel, or graphic memoir, called Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe. Maia Kobabe uses the pronouns E-R-M, and I am going to try not to mess that up. I did read this book and really, frankly, just loved it. It's so good. I seek out things like this because I want to try to understand other experiences of the world, and this was part of my reading goal for last year, which was that I wanted to read more books that have LGBTQ representation that focuses on the letters other than the G. I'm pretty good at the G. I got the gay covered, but I wanted to make sure I focused on things that have lesbian, bisexual, transgender, questioning representation in them, and this was part of that. And if you are someone who has ever wondered about why pronouns can matter, if you've ever wondered about why gender identity can matter and what it can be like to discover your gender identity and try to figure out who you are, this is a really fantastic book for you. And I got a lot out of it, and it's definitely something I am happy to keep on my shelves and would recommend to you. So this is one that I did actually read after it was hauled, and I enjoyed. So double whammy. Way to go, Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe. I think I managed to get through that without using a pronoun either. Just happened that way. The next book is My Father and Myself by J.R. Ackerly. This was something that Sean the Book Maniac had mentioned in a video, and I was interested in it and just snapped it up. And then Sean and I actually did a buddy read of this back in May and June, I believe. And I really liked it. I had a bit of an issue with the ending. Sean had less of an issue with the ending, but basically it feels like it didn't quite build to anything for me. Sean didn't have that problem, but I did. Nevertheless, I did really enjoy the rest of the book. This is about, so J.R. Ackerly was a writer who was pretty openly gay in a time when it was not common to do that. He wrote this book after his father's death because he discovered that his father had a secret family and had been basically living a lie for all of those years. And he wrote the book as a sort of examination where he was trying to understand who his father was, but also his relationship to his father. Because while his father had been alive, he had been fairly incurious about his father's life, or resistant to a relationship. They had a kind of strained relationship, even though they clearly loved each other. And it's very interesting in all that. I really enjoyed it. And if you follow along, you know I really like complicated family stories. I love books and memoirs where somebody is kind of interrogating the past and reflecting on why things are the way they are or where they ended up the way they are. So this is something that was right up my alley. J.R. Ackerly is a great writer. I think the thing that potentially makes the ending not so good to me is that it ends, but then there's an afterword, and the afterword includes a lot of things that he had taken out of the book for good reason. And what happens when you have all of that extra material is it doesn't feel like the book ends where it's supposed to end. It feels like it continues, and then the ending is even more unsatisfying for me, at least, because it continues into stuff that was omitted and should have been omitted. So I did enjoy the book very much, but the ending just kind of left me a little bit when I wanted more. I wanted like a bow on this book, and there isn't really a bow. It's more about the journey, and I think that's part of it. Like I don't want to go too far into this because we're doing a haul revisit and I'm talking about the book a whole lot, but I think it's more about the journey and the fact that there weren't going to be answers anymore because his father was gone. It was already too late. So it's more about that. And here's me trying to be like, well, I want resolution. So I don't know. It's an interesting relationship, but I did read this book and I did very much enjoy it. Next, we get to The Friend by Sigrid Nunez. This is something that I had been kind of resistant to the idea of reading, and I was in my local indie, and the person working there, she actually had ordered my father and myself for me, and we were talking about it, and she actually ordered a copy for herself, and then she was talking to me about this book, because the other book J.R. Ackerly wrote was about his dog, and she was telling me about this book and how I need to read it. And I've been very resistant to the idea because I can't really read things about dogs, because especially if the dog dies, it really upsets me. I have 2 dogs, and that was like my limit for anything that involves dogs potentially dying. And she told me, no, it's not that bad. It's not that bad is not actually comforting for me in that regard. Some people did comment on my book haul video and tell me, oh, no, it's a great book. A year later, I still can't really stomach the idea of reading it because it's the dog angle still. So I think what I'm going to do with The Friend, even though it's a National Book Award winner and people like it, I honestly don't think I'm ever going to get around to reading it. So my used bookstore has been open for a while. I had made an appointment a while ago and got rid of some books that I had been wanting to get rid of during the pandemic and couldn't because there was nowhere to take them. So I think I'm going to make another appointment and see about getting rid of The Friend, because honestly, I can't see myself pushing to get to this anytime soon, or really anytime, just because it's something that really stresses me out and upsets me, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. But if you disagree, leave a comment. Maybe you can change my mind. Tell me why this is something I need to read, and I'll marinate on it before I actually do anything. But I'm thinking this is going to be an unhaul. So I'm going to leave it separate from the rest of the books. Then we get to Black Light by Kimberly King Parsons. It's a collection of short stories. It had been longlisted, and I think it was even shortlisted for the National Book Award last year. I did read it. It was a buddy read with Simon Savage from Savage Reads, and I did not particularly like it. I thought it was fine. Parts of it were fine, but mostly I was just kind of meh. So the reason I'm not holding it up is I unhauled it at the end of last year, decided not something I particularly felt like keeping on my shelf, and I could, the greedy person in me was thinking, if I bring this to my used bookstore, I could potentially bring other things that I might like more or might want to read into my library. So that is what I did. There you go. It is no longer in my library, but I did read it. So I can kind of check that off the list. And like I said, it's just not something that was ever going to spark joy revisiting on my shelf. So I said goodbye. And there it is. Next is The Buddha in the Attic by Julie Otsuka. I had gotten this because it was on sale at my library. My library sells used books, so for $1 I got it. why not? I had been thinking I would do it for novellas in November because it's very slim. I ended up listening to the audio in November instead. So I did read it, but not the print book. I listened to it on audio. And I thought it was okay. I didn't really love it. It wasn't quite what I expected it to be, which is always a dangerous thing because that feels unfair. Your expectation for what something should be shouldn't matter. And honestly, I don't even remember much about the book, which means I don't really remember what it was that was meh about it to me. So it's just kind of a blank. And I think for that reason, I'm thinking of putting this on the pile with a friend because it's not something that's necessarily going to spark joy on my shelf. It's not something I'm feeling like I'm going to revisit. So if I can pass it on and maybe get something else from the used bookstore on my shelf, I feel like I would rather do that. So I did read it. That's the good news. But yeah, I think I'm going to put it on the pile with a friend. And if you disagree, make a case down below in the comment section. For this one at least, I have read it and felt meh about it. So tell me why it should spark joy on my shelf, or why I should try to remind myself what this is, what this book even is, because I'm really drawing a blank on it. I know it's stories of women who immigrate to the country and their experiences, but specific details are lost to me, to be honest. Next, we have another thing that came from the library. It was on sale there. It's Pigs in Heaven by Barbara Kingsolver. This, I believe, is a follow-up to The Bean Trees. Yeah, it picks up on the character from that book, and I have read The Bean Trees, but would need to reread it before I would do this, because I would want to remind myself where the characters in that left off. I believe The Bean Trees is a woman leaves her hometown and she's driving across the country to California and ends up in Arizona. And she had wanted to leave because she wanted to escape the cycle of repetition where people in her family would have kids young, and she ends up with a kid, a toddler. And the book is about her expectations for what her life was going to be and discovering that life sometimes takes different paths, and it's about acceptance and discovering who you are. And I remember it being a really beautiful book. It's something I would want to revisit. So this continues the story of that character and the toddler who ended up in her care. I have not read it, as you can guess, because as I said, I would want to read The Bean Trees first, and I don't own a copy of The Bean Trees. So this is something I would definitely keep on my shelf, but I need to read another book before I can read this. So it's going to be a while. But yeah, definitely something I'm still interested in reading and am not going to be getting rid of anytime soon. I'm going to be honest, it's not the prettiest edition in the world. I think this is an original hardcover from when it was published, and I don't remember the year. 1993. So there you go. But yeah, beggars can't be choosers. This was on sale at my library for, I think hardcovers are $2. So yeah, can't argue with that. And then there were 2 books that we got at Barnes & Noble. My husband had encouraged me to take advantage of one of those, buy 2, get the third free, and I don't remember what the third book we got was because it was not in the book haul. But I picked out Wild by Cheryl Strayed. I remember I have seen the movie, which starred Reese Witherspoon and was one of the first projects that she produced with her production company. Was a big fan of it and had always kind of wanted to come back and read the book. If you are unfamiliar with the movie or with the book, it is a memoir about how in her early 20s, Cheryl Strayed was dealing with grief over the loss of her mother. She was recovering from addiction. So she decided to hike, I think it was the Pacific Crest Trail? Pacific Crest Trail from the Mojave Desert through California and Oregon into Washington State. She did it alone, and on the journey she just kind of thought about her life and everything and tried to come to terms with it. I enjoyed the movie, so I've always kind of wanted to go back and read the book. I think this was blessed by Oprah, but it does not have the logo on the book, and I feel, oh no, it says an Oprah's Book Club 2.0 pick. You would think it would have the logo, but yeah, it is an Oprah book. So I have not gotten around to it. This is not something I would be urgently seeking to read, so it's not a surprise I didn't get to it in the first year. It's kind of something that I would want to leave on my shelf, and when I have time or it strikes my fancy, I would pick it up and read it. Probably because I've seen the movie, I don't have that sense of urgency to take in the story, but it's something that has always been interested in me, and I kind of like having those books that are more long-term projects that you can get to when you feel like it. So this is one of those. It will be staying around. The other book that we selected, or that I selected, was Dead Wake, The Last Crossing of the Lusitania by Erik Larson. I have read 2 books by Erik Larson. Those are The Devil in the White City, for sure, and the other one was In the Garden of Beasts. It's right there on the cover. Those are the 2 that I've read. Actually, I listened to In the Garden of Beasts on audio, and I enjoyed both of them, but also had kind of problems with both of them. I think, for example, in the Devil in the White City, there are 2 different storylines. One about a serial killer, H.H. Holmes, who was operating in the Chicago area at the time of the World's Fair, and the other half of the story is about basically the creation of the World's Fair in Chicago and the Ferris wheel and things like that. And I don't think Erik Larson actually manages to marry the 2 plot points. He basically just will repeatedly say in the book, it's kind of the light and the dark going on at the same time. But I kept always looking for more of a connecting point between them, and I never quite got it. I thought it was all fascinating. In the Garden of Beasts, I thought was all really interesting, but again, had kind of little quibbles with. But still, I've always been, I will always be interested in an Erik Larson book. I have a hold on the audio of his new book about Churchill in World War II, The Splendid and the Vile. I also have a copy of it on my shelf, and this is another one that once I actually, now that I have the book, I tend to listen to nonfiction on audio a lot, so this is probably something I would be more likely to listen to than to read, but no sense getting rid of it. And it's in the same zip code as Wild, where it's something that I would not urgently want to rush to, but I'm still interested in getting to at some point. Obviously, this book is about the Lusitania, in case you couldn't tell, and it's something that I will be getting to at some point, I'm sure. Then, if you follow along, you know that in previous book haul revisits or book hauls, I discovered Little Sisters Classics last year. So these are books that were put out by Arsenal Pulp Press. They took what they deemed to be LGBTQ books that were in danger of being lost or forgotten and out of print, and they reprint them and put them out there for people to discover. So I had gotten a couple of them in a previous book haul and book haul revisit, and I have 2 more to talk about here. The first is Franny, the Queen of Provincetown by John Preston. I had been thinking that the story is interesting, but I had also been thinking that I might get to it for novellas in November because it's only small. But I did not get to it, and I had originally put it on my TBR for June because in June I like to read LGBTQ focused or themed books, and I threw out my TBR this year to focus on Black queer stories in June instead, so this one went by the wayside. So it's definitely something that's still on my radar and I'd still like to get to. There are 141 pages, but that includes the appendices. So one of the things that's nice about the Little Sisters Classics is that they include all of this bonus material at the end. Like, I don't know if you can see it, but that's original cover art from the Allison edition of this book, which I'd assume was the original printing. It has Q&As, lots of fun supplemental material that go with the book. So there's 141 pages, but that includes the supplemental material. So this is, again, only a small book. And since I didn't get to it in June for Pride Month, I am thinking I may try to get it in for novellas in November again. So it's still something that's very much on my radar and I would like to get to. It's not going anywhere, that's for sure. And then the other Little Sisters classic I got was Finistère. I don't speak French, so I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, by Fritz Peters. This one, it's not only small, but it's same zip code. It's something I'm definitely interested in, would love to get to at some point. And it is a coming-of-age story, first published in 1951, acclaimed by many, including Gore Vidal and the New York Times. So, I mean, come on. What more do you need to know? And yeah, I'm very interested in getting to this one as well. Even if I don't for a while, it's something that I am happy to have on my shelf because I love the Little Sisters Classics series and I love the idea behind it, and Arsenal Pulp Press putting them out. So very happy to continue to have that on my shelf and my TBR. When will I get to it? I don't know. I feel like because Franny the Queen of Provincetown is tiny, it's a lot easier to slip into a priority list. And I think in terms of the other Little Sisters classics that I own, I'd probably put this one behind Blackbird by Larry Duplichin and, I'm blanking, what was Sister Sarah? Something like that. There's a list on the inside flap of this one, I think, of all of them. Patience and Sarah by Isabel Miller is the other one that I own, in addition to Song of the Loon by Richard Amory. So I put Patience and Sarah and Blackbird and Franny ahead of Finistère, and then probably Finistère before Song of the Loon. I don't know why I'm ranking my interest in these books, but there it is. Then we get to Down and Dirty Pictures by Peter Biskind. This is Miramax, Sundance, and the Rise of Independent Film. If you follow along at all, you know that I am very interested in movies and the Oscars, and you really can't take Miramax out of the Oscar story in the last 30 years or so. And this book was mentioned on a podcast that I listened to called This Had Oscar Buzz. They pretty much called this a foundational text of movies in the last 25 years because as uncomfortable as it is, Harvey Weinstein has shaped how people campaign for Academy Awards, how the film industry handles awards, and how it distributes its movies and releases them, and how it kind of all the machinery behind the scenes of it. So this book obviously deals with that, the rise of Miramax, and I don't think it goes into the fall of Miramax because it was published before any of that. Yeah, it was copyright 2004, so it would have been before a lot of the downfall. But it's something that I am very interested in, even though a lot of the figures who were in this book, because Miramax's Harvey Weinstein and his brother are not great, but I'm very interested in this story, and I've heard that this is just a really good book and very informational about a subject matter that I am very much interested in. It is a hefty little chunkster of a book. So I will be getting to it at some point. I wonder if there's an audio at some point, but it is something that I would really like to have on my shelf. There is a huge index in the back of the book, so maybe it's not as long as it seems. Okay, the postscript goes up to about page 484, so it's still a chunky book. It was never not going to be a chunky book just because of the index, but yeah, it's something I'm very much interested in, will get to at some point, possibly on audio instead of the print edition. However, because it is something that I am deeply interested in, it is definitely going to be on my shelf, and it's something that I would be happy to keep on my shelf. Then a book that I got at my used bookstore, All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. I had already read this. I read All the King's Men, I think back in 2004. There was a movie version of it with Sean Penn and Kate Winslet and Jude Law and a whole large cast, and when they announced that project, I thought I would want to read it before I saw the movie, and then I never saw the movie because it got terrible reviews. I did see the Broderick Crawford version of the movie, which is from 1949, I think, and I don't think this is a movie tie-in, but the poster kind of looks like Broderick Crawford, which was probably deliberate. So anyway, so that it's been twice adapted. I have read it. I have seen one of the adaptations and not the other. But when I decided to do my Pulitzer Prize project last year, in which I read all of the books that won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, I went a little mad picking up books that I want to read and reread as part of that project. This is something I would be happy to reread. Honestly, I don't know what happened to my edition of it. I remember really liking the book and feeling like it was, so it was kind of an excuse to get a copy of it that I can have on my shelf, and I will probably reread it at some point in my Pulitzer Prize project. Because it is so much about politics and corruption, it feels like it is still a very timely book, so I will be revisiting it at some point. It's about Willie Stark. I'm trying to remember the name of the person who inspired the story. I want to say Huey Long. Please don't quote me on that, because I'm not going to look it up. But yeah, it's inspired by an actual political figure, and it's about the rise and fall of someone who started out his political career very optimistic and wanting to do good, and ends up falling prey to corruption and becoming part of the machine he had despised. It's classic. Then there's another book that Sean the Book Maniac had put on my radar. It's Wish Her Safe at Home by Stephen Benatar. It is from the New York Review of Books. Still something I'm very much interested in reading. It's something that sounds very interesting to me. I haven't done the blurb on a lot of these, but let's do this one. Rachel Waring is deliriously happy. Out of nowhere, a great aunt leaves her a Georgian mansion in another city, and she sheds her old life without delay. Gone is her dull administrative job, her mousy wardrobe, her downer of a roommate. She will live as a woman of leisure, devoted to beauty, creativity, expression, and love. Once installed in her new quarters, Rachel plants a garden, takes up writing, and impresses everyone she meets with her extraordinary optimism. But as Rachel sings and jokes the days away, her new neighbors begin to wonder if she might be taking her transformation just a bit too far. In Wish Her Safe at Home, Stephen Benatar finds humor and horror in the shifting region between elation and mania. And here's one of the selling points. His heroine could be the next-door neighbor of the Beals of Grey Gardens or a sister to Jane Gardam's oddball protagonist. I don't actually know who Jane Gardam is, but the Beals of Grey Gardens I am intimately familiar with. Well, not intimately, but I am very familiar with. So, yeah, very much looking forward to this. I believe Stephen Benatar is an LGBTQ author. This is not an LGBTQ book, but still something I'm really interested in. I've heard this book is funny and witty and smart and just a delight. So I'm really looking forward to Wish Her Safe at Home by Stephen Benatar at some point. Then a book I'm not actually super excited to read, but I'm very intrigued by, if that makes sense. It's The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now, I DNF'd The Goldfinch and have never really looked back, but people always tell me The Secret History is a masterpiece. And I don't know. So I feel like I need to read it. It is a proper chunky book. So I got it so I would have it on my shelf and I could think about it. Because I really just did not like The Goldfinch very much, I have resisted the idea of picking it up, but I will read it at some point because people whose opinion on books I really deeply respect have told me that this is a really good book. So I need to get to it at some point. I believe it's about a circle of friends in college who there's like a crime and secrets and corruption of the human spirit or of the soul and all that. So I will get to this at some point, and it's not going anywhere. I will do it at some point. I'll get over my Goldfinch resentment and give Donna Tartt another try. I've heard mixed things about her other book, The Little Friend, but Secret History, a lot of people love. It's very beloved by a lot of people, so it'll happen. I don't know when, but it will happen. Let me move that pile so the books aren't sticking out. And the final book that was in that book haul, I don't have because I got rid of it. I had actually already read it by the time I did the book haul because in September of last year I was recovering from foot surgery and couldn't move for an entire weekend. I couldn't really get off the couch for an entire weekend. So I read The Chestnut Man by Søren Sveistrup. And here's what I said about it in my original book haul. Yeah, save yourself the time and the energy. Do not do The Chestnut Man. Anyway, in case you couldn't tell, I didn't like it. I really didn't like it. I thought it was kind of a garbage book. It has a lot of the mystery cliches that I really despise. I think the female protagonist is treated like a sex object and just a shallow character. There's so much about that book that I really did not like. It was one of my least favorite books of last year, so I didn't keep it. I pretty much immediately, right after that book haul, took it to my local used bookstore. They took it back. It went on the shelf. I believe it sold because I didn't see it the next time I was in the store. I saw it on the display the next weekend, and then it was gone after that. So I assume some poor soul bought it. Just was not for me, so I got rid of it. There you go. So, to sum up the September book haul and my book haul revisit for how the first year of owning these books went, that is 16 books that I brought into my library in September of 2019. One of those books had already been read. That was All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. I have since read 5 of the other books. Those are The Chestnut Man, which technically I had read by the time I did the haul, but had not read when I brought it in. So those were The Chestnut Man, My Father and Myself, Genderqueer, Blacklight, and The Buddha in the Attic. So 5 that I read since the book haul, we're including the Chestnut Man again, which leaves 10 books still unread. I unhauled 2 of the books, that was Blacklight by Kimberly King Parsons and the Chestnut Man. I hated the Chestnut Man, and the Blacklight just wasn't something that was going to spark joy, to steal a phrase. And I am probably going to be unhauling an additional 2, one of which I read and just, like Blacklight, didn't really spark joy, and one of which I honestly can't see myself pushing to read. But if you disagree, once again, please leave me some feedback in the comments down below and let me know why you think I should give The Friend by Sigrid Nunez a chance. So, that's my book haul revisit for the month of September. If you have thoughts, opinions, just general comments about any of the books I have discussed or about other books by any of the authors I've discussed, I would love to hear them. Again, leave them in the comment section down below. You know what to do. But just in case, the comment section is down there. If you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate your time, as always, especially if you subscribe. If you are not subscribed, hopefully you enjoyed this enough to follow along. And as always, I will be back. Until then, happy reading.